Welcome to the Women in the Arena podcast, a platform dedicated to honoring America's women veterans who dare greatly in all aspects of life. I'm your host, Sarah Scully. At Women in the Arena, we harness the power of storytelling to illuminate the human experience. Through authentic narratives, we honor the resilience, authenticity, and leadership of women who have served our country. Our name, Women in the Arena, pays homage to Theodore Roosevelt's legendary speech, The Man in the Arena, recognizing the remarkable contributions of women in traditionally male-dominated domains. Welcome back to the Women in the Arena podcast. We're honored to welcome Meg Tucker, an Army veteran and founder of the Valkyrie Project, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting and empowering servicewomen. Meg spent 15 years in the military, beginning her career as an Army pilot before transitioning into special operations as a psychological operations officer. Now she's leading the charge in advocacy for women veterans, helping them optimize their training, health, and performance through the Valkyrie Project. In this episode, we dive into Meg's journey from aviator to nonprofit leader, the unique challenges women face when training at an elite level, and how they can train smarter to maximize their performance. Please note, this episode was recorded before the recent change in presidential administrations, and we may reference policies or priorities from the former Biden administration. As shifts take place under the current Trump administration, we recognize that advocacy for women veterans continues to evolve. We are grateful for leaders like Meg who remain committed to advancing these issues, ensuring that servicewomen are seen, heard, and supported. This is a conversation you won't want to miss. Let's get into it. All right, Meg, welcome to the Women in the Arena podcast. We're so stoked you're here, making a very crazy trek up the coast to be with us here in the DC area. Thank you so much for your time amidst your busy schedule and all the amazing things you're doing.
Thank you for having me. I'm here in one piece, so I think it was destiny that we did this.
Certainly. Well, I'm so excited to get into some of your current work, some of the amazing initiatives you're getting behind. But first, let's introduce you to our audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your career, kind of how you ended up where you are now with what you're doing now.
Okay. My name is Meg. I spent the first 5.5 years of my active duty Army career as a Kiowa Warrior pilot. And then the Army divested / got rid of that airframe because it was too old. And so I, at that point, submitted a packet and applied for Special Operations Forces in the Army and went out for assessment and selection and got picked up for psychological operations. And so the back half of my active duty Army career was in PSYOP. And while I was in the train up for PSYOP and doing the captain's career course, I essentially had the realization that there wasn't a brand that existed for special operations women, and I felt kind of left out because there was a lot in the market for men in terms of branding, in terms of training, physical preparedness training, as well as community support. And you might even make the argument of like lifestyle brands. There are lots of companies out there that are oriented towards selling special operator males, coffee and T-shirts and a lifestyle. But there was just nothing like that for women. And so that was the inception of the Valkyrie Project. It was initially oriented on having the community and human performance training for women. And since that time, around 2018, I've gotten out of the Army. I got out of the Army in December of 23 and have been putting basically all my energy for the last year into helping VP stand up as a nonprofit.
It's amazing. And I can't wait to talk about what you guys are doing with the Valkyrie Project. Let's take a few steps back. So for those maybe not as familiar with some of the things you brought up in your career, tell us what your experience in the PSYOPs community was like and what that entailed for you.
I really enjoyed PSYOPs. And if I'll describe by making a bit of a comparison. This was just my experience. I can't speak for everyone that was ever currently or in the past an aviator, but my experience in Army aviation was pretty difficult. I encountered more sexism and different treatment and sort of this environment of ego-driven everything. Ego is the main driver behind decision-making and, how people interact with each other and how the official and unofficial pecking orders are established. So I found it really kind of oppressive and exhausting and pretty isolating at times, especially being one of the only women in my position as a platoon leader. But what I appreciated about PSYOP most in comparison was the caliber of people and their emotional intellect, their capacity to relate to other people that maybe they didn't have a lot in common with, and the encouragement that I received in that environment to be an independent thinker and have unusual and cool ideas, and even in some cases to respectfully challenge authority and bring different perspectives when something seemed like it wasn't a good idea or wasn't being run as efficiently as it could have been. So I really enjoyed that about PSYOP. And probably the second biggest thing I enjoyed about PSYOP was in my particular circumstance at the time, there was a lot of flexibility within the command for deploying teams to more or less shape or craft their own objectives or their goals for a particular mission set in a deployed environment. So you'd have like the broader goals of the embassy and the broader goals of the command and the broader goals of perhaps a command that you were deploying in support of. But there was leeway for us to examine every deployed problem set and present to higher leadership. These are the things that really need some more focus that's been overlooked. Or these are things that are really going to be a big payoff in terms of meeting more strategic goals. And everything on the aviation side was so much more technical. Mm-hmm. It was about, you memorize all the stuff and you fly the aircraft right. And frankly, I never got to deploy in the Kiowa, so certainly there's a lot more of an art to it. I think in a deployed environment, in combat, when the battle space is unpredictable and you have to be ready to think at a moment's notice and adapt to whatever's happening. So I didn't have that experience, but I enjoyed really a lot of the autonomy and the ability to self-exert and kind of grow as an officer in an environment where not every idea was stifled. And you could have a personality. In fact, you could be a little bit of a weirdo. You could be a little bit of a nerd. And in many circles in SOF, that was encouraged.
Yeah.
So certainly. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you for that. That's a super insightful answer. So moving forward a little bit, tell us first about the mission of the Valkyrie Project, what you all stand for, and then can't wait to get into the amazing things that you're doing.
Sure. So we started out, like I said, we started out as an LLC with a primary focus on human performance. And the main reason being that I had been exposed through my personal coach at the time to some training techniques that were pretty novel to me. And that took a slightly different approach for women athletes. And it's something that I had never been exposed to. I was previously a competitive CrossFitter. And it was always a blanket program. Like, if you want to be elite, you go do these things. But I learned some things working with that initial coach that really were the tip of the iceberg in the broader idea that maybe there's a better approach for training women, and we can do them a favor in helping them perform better and being more competent and really competitive for promotion and other privileges in the workspace by training them better. So it started out like that, and then after a couple of years, I think it was around 2022, I just was introduced via a mutual friend, Lydia Kostopoulos, in case she's listening. She just wrote a book. She's amazing. And so Lydia introduced myself and a couple of other women that were like-minded and working in this space of, we feel like there's more to the story in terms of helping women integrate completely, and not only in the book sense, but really to feel included and to be seen as an asset in their organizations as opposed to a liability, because a lot of these organizational structures are not built to accommodate or take care of women. So started talking with these people, and actually it was Lydia's idea. She said one day during this brainstorming Zoom call, well, we could have a symposium. We could run our own symposium. And I'm like, ugh, who's going to run that? And it turned out it was us. So we put together a symposium and had the first one in 2022 and, 23, and had the second one this past March at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. And we're currently planning the third annual symposium, which will be in Washington, D.C. in March 6th and 7th at the U.S. Navy Memorial. And so throughout that process of from basically the first to the second symposium, I was talking to my friend Tristan, who's now on our board of directors, and was like, this really needs to be a nonprofit because we've expanded now from identifying the problem of a human performance aspect to really no one can perform well when they don't have equipment and gear that's made for their body that fits them properly. No one can perform well when parenthood life stressors are so gargantuan at home that there's no bandwidth left for other requirements at work. And so really it became a question of what is the paradigm that needs to be overcome in order for women to have a better opportunity to advance. And I wouldn't say we're necessarily, there's a lot of buzzwords that mean different things to different people, including EO, DEI, women's peace and security. Frankly, for us, it's about shining a light on the fact that the DoD and the U.S. military were built by and for men predominantly historically. And we're at a point in history now where we can no longer afford to overlook the asset that women are. And frankly, a lot of the gaps that still exist, in my mind, border on negligent. I mean, it's offensive that military working dogs have customized equipment that fits their bodies properly, but women jumping out of airplanes and women going into combat don't. So that's kind of why we expanded into the nonprofit, because we saw opportunities for better advocacy, supporting research efforts, educating people on the knowledge that they don't know, they don't have about women's bodies and how they function, and opportunities to optimize them for combat.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to get into so much of this. That was such a fantastic answer. So let's start with research, and let's start with what the gaps are. You touched a little bit on equipment. I'd like to talk some more about performance. When I read about the work you all do, I just think, where was this when I was a student? Because I was looking for something so similar, because like many young aspiring military leaders, you're training, trying to get your body ready for the things that you want to do. And I was sharing these workout plans with some of my guy friends, and it's not to say that I couldn't do them, but it was, like you said, just this one size fits all pipeline or training or something to put your body through. And I did feel like at times, like, there are things about my body that are different than yours, and there are things about me and training considerations I need to have that are different than you. And I think we've learned in the last decade, especially as service members, that we are different, and it's okay. That doesn't mean that, opportunities need to be barred from certain people. It just means we bring different things to the table, and we have different considerations to make all those opportunities equitable for everybody that has them. So talk to us about what type of research you're either advocating for or currently getting behind that proves that those considerations need to be made for women, and that there is a need that needs to be filled for training, wellness. You talked a little bit about hormonal health and how that plays into optimizing performance.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to try and wrangle the can of worms and not go on too many tangents. But from a coaching perspective, I've coached female tactical athletes for a long time and kind of taken a pause from that in recent months / the last year in order to focus a little bit more on being the president of the board. But overall, from my experience being a tactical athlete and being a coach of women tactical athletes and paying attention to the emergent research, I feel confident in saying that anyone listening to this podcast who has had experience in the human performance realm as an individual coach, trainer, what have you, probably has encountered a situation wherein the literature can simultaneously say one thing and then another piece of literature or research completely upends it, right? And of course, from a scientific standpoint, those situations in which there's not a hard answer, yes or no, this makes sense or it doesn't, often comes from a variance in the way that the studies were conducted, or just generally a lack of sufficient data, sufficient volume of data to convincingly go to an organization like, name your human performance outlet, and say, yes, we should be doing things this way. And the challenge there is there are two camps currently specifically related to women's performance and training around cycles, right? There's a camp that says it doesn't make sense to train women around their menstrual cycles because we don't have enough scientific evidence to say that makes a difference, right? And then there's another camp that says actually there's a lot of emergent research that says we need to be looking at this more. Personally, I can't say for sure what the future looks like, but if I had my best prediction come true, I think that we will find over time that there are a lot more implications for the cycle and how it impacts our physiology than people can imagine right now. And in fact, recently there was a study that came out that showed literal physiological changes in women's brain white matter across the cycle, showing that these sex hormones have an impact on brain matter, which I think logically leads you down the rabbit hole of, well, what does that mean in terms of how a woman's humanity is expressed, whether it's through fitness or mood or cognition, what have you, right? So the approach that the Valkyrie Project has taken is to provide workout programming for women that is cycle-based. And, for women that are on birth control, we feel confident that our program is still effective because it's kind of a neither here nor there thing. Like the intensity highs and lows are built in a way that still feel intuitive. But our stance is one of, okay, maybe, the broader community of human performance experts hasn't come together and slapped the table and said, yes, we absolutely should train around the cycle or not. But it's intuitive to me that if most American women report adverse symptoms and they report feeling, tired or bloated or in pain during certain times of the month, why as a coach would I not take that feedback and implement it into the program? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a big picture thing that we're missing, and that's probably going to become more important in the future as the science evolves. And in addition to that, frankly, service women are shown to be presenting more frequently and younger with certain diseases that the rest of the population doesn't deal with until later. Military women tend to go through perimenopause a little earlier. Military women tend to present with breast cancer more often. So to me, that says there's a physiological aspect here, whether it's, your toxic hazard exposure or chronic stress, chronic fatigue, what have you. There are so many factors that can be looked at. But these questions haven't been answered. And I think that's also evident through the White House's recent initiative for women's health research. If, the president of the United States' wife is pushing this initiative for all American women in general, you take that, that's not a niche, right? Like that's 50% of the population. But women in the military are niche because of the unique requirements for them to perform and do their jobs. So for me, that's enough strong evidence to say we don't understand well enough what these implications are. And for female tactical athletes, we need to look at these things more closely, especially in the broader context of there are a number of different think tanks and defense experts that are pointing towards LSCO, large-scale combat operations, because of concerns that we're going to go to war with China at some point. And so do you want chronically fatigued, ill, broken soldiers, or do you want people that perform well? And for me, that's the bottom line.
It's also it really dips into the issue of retention too. I mean, we are not in a place where we can lose the highest performing top people that are serving in our military, we are in a position to be retaining who we can retain, and we most certainly want to retain the best. And if you can't create an environment where everyone can succeed and stay healthy and be a part of what they want to do, but also still take care of themselves, we certainly can't do that. And I love that you're advocating for this research, because I think any woman, especially listening to this, can think of a time where they were frustrated with their body, not understanding why they felt a certain way, not understanding why, they weren't performing the way that they should, why they felt, I mean, it's a joke. It's like we either are tired, have a headache, or a stomach ache, depending on the day. And I think we're often met with just kind of the blanket answer from medicine, which is just, you're just a woman, you have a complicated body, you're hormonal, and we could give you the birth control pill and maybe that'll fix it.
Which is a total cop-out.
Yeah.
It's a total cop-out. There's a book called Invisible Women that I haven't finished yet, but so far is excellent. It has just chock full of examples in which it's been too difficult for the scientific community, quote unquote, air quotes, too difficult for the scientific community to look at women because of these fluctuations of hormones. But really, they're often discussed in a context of bad things like headaches and moodiness and this and that. Well, what if we're missing some really key, important evidence? It's like, I'm imbalanced, therefore I have a headache. But if you can give me the right training in nutrition and sleep and stress management protocols, I could perform, who knows, 20 to 50% better, right? And then some of these things go away. But that's all information that we still don't have. And related to the retention question, I recognize that the military doesn't exist for the purpose of employing people and making sure that they're perfectly happy and comfortable for the rest of their lives. I mean, a lot of commands will say these kinds of things because it's kind of the right thing to say, even if it's not totally true. But the reality is when we go to war, we go to war.
Right.
And it's all the stops come out. And so, I say all these things through the perspective of acknowledgement of the fact that, you are an asset for the United States to physically, kinetically defeat another country in the event that we have a war. And so I realize that, there's a great chance that we'll never get everything that we want or need. But especially in an environment where, as you said, some of our best talent is trading out because they have chronic issues that are unaddressed. Chronic body aches that start as something small and become unmanageable. Chronic family management issues where their command and the deployment cycle, or opportunities that they're given for promotion or key development jobs, just it continues to not be sufficient for women, right? That's, in these situations where the command is like, well, I assumed you would probably have a baby soon, so I just figured Johnson would be better as an S3. And it's like, what shit is that? You didn't ask me. Assumptions made about what decisions women want to make. So if we truly want to be ready for the worst conflict that we can imagine, this is about optimization and keeping the good people that we have, and keeping the good people requires an investment.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other considerations that you take to training outside of hormonal cycles and hormonal health, like anything musculoskeletal or any other approach when it comes to thinking about the needs of a female tactical athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm certainly borrowing from I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and one of them is my current coach, who's a male, Michael Bann. He's a genius. And borrowing from him and from other people that I've learned from over the years and from my own experience as a coach, generally female TAC athletes and women writ large need more exposure to upper body strength work in order to be able to meet close to or the same standard as males. So that's more upper body push-pull stuff. It might be more accessory work for the shoulder girdle. And we found that a technique of layering those movements, a daily undulating progression where you might have push-ups and pull-ups one day, and then a couple days later med ball passes to the wall, or some even just cable machine type lifts, a blend of upper body stimuli throughout the week is something that, ironically, women tend to be able to handle in training more than men, but also need more of it.
Interesting.
Because we tend to be able to mobilize our fat sources as energy more efficiently than men. We tend to fizzle out as quickly in certain movements. So I think something Michael said at the first symposium, which is really a great watch, by the way. Everyone should go check out our YouTube channel. Like, there's all kinds of great nuggets of wisdom in there, but women can perform sometimes multiple sets of lifts at 90% of whatever their recorded max capacity is, whereas males tend not to be able to. And so there's a physiological difference there, right? And if you know those differences, then you can employ them to your benefit. Another thing is that women tend to generally have a better zone 2 aerobic baseline. Mm-hmm. They tend to be able to continue moderate aerobic work for long periods of time better than men. We're talking like extreme long times. Like, this has been shown in ultramarathon research. And so there's an opportunity there to maybe, okay, let's do some testing first off to see where you are. And if you're already a zone 2 stud, I'm going to give a lot more emphasis to your anaerobic work or your lactic zones in order to give you that extra push when, there's a time limit 2-mile run or something like that. So those are a couple things that are a little bit different for women. And generally we tend to have fewer fast twitch muscle fibers. And so some explosive work training is valuable in order to essentially convert some muscle groups from more type 1 to more type 2.
Backtrack. I don't know what you just said, but I'm still fascinated. So what does that mean? Type 1, type 2?
Fast twitch and slow twitch.
Okay.
So fast twitch is like, imagine you're making an attempt to dunk a basketball in a hoop, right? Fast twitch is the explosive muscle fiber that can make your body move at a faster velocity with more power, whereas slow twitch is a type of muscle fiber that essentially moves slower, but it can do that movement repeatedly over time.
Oh, interesting.
As opposed to fast twitch, think like sprinters. They can go all out for whatever their given distance is, but you're not going to see that particular performance repeated 5 minutes later. Mm-hmm. Whereas with slow twitch muscle groups, it's different. So women need a little bit more training in the fast twitch.
As you're bringing each of these up, I'm just thinking about my strengths and weaknesses physically, and I'm like, check. These are all accurate.
Girl, same. I don't escape these things either.
Long, slow runs, not a sprinter.
Right.
Okay, so interesting. And then what about recovery?
So if I can give nuggets about recovery, in general, there's increasingly more of a consensus that women need more sleep than men, especially around their period. And in the luteal phase, which starts the day after, like basically ovulation until day 1 of your bleed is luteal. Women tend to need, according to Dr. Stacey Sims, about 200-ish more calories of nutrition a day in that window. Our core temperatures tend to go a little higher in that window, and our heart rate variability tends to go down, which is seen as kind of a negative thing broadly in the human performance community. However, if you understand this about your athlete, as a coach, you can make those adjustments in training and not be alarmed when, as an example, their Oura ring says, you're poorly recovered. And, forgive me for being out of touch. I think Oura has recently implemented wild AI science data algorithms in order to make those recommendations for recovery for women more intuitive, because previously they were over-reporting women as under-recovered because their physiology is different for a week or two in the second half of their cycle.
Right.
But so we tend to need a little bit more sleep, especially in luteal and the bleed phase. My theory, and I can't prove it with data, but I feel pretty confident. My theory is that most women in the U.S. military have unaddressed disordered eating habits. It's a function of our society imposing unrealistic standards on women, but then women who join the ranks increasingly are exposed to that through mechanisms like height and weight requirements, body image requirements. There's a little bit of an underground culture of like, well, let's all make fun of the chubby person in their uniform. And so I think there's more pressure on American servicewomen than the average American woman to look and perform a certain way. And so in terms of recovery, I would say for any service member that's a woman listening to this right now, try and find a nutritionist that can give you what your daily calorie targets are. For many of you, I would wager that you're under. And women actually who undereat over time not only underperform and don't recover very well, but we tend to hold on to we tend to hold on to body fat, and this is a survival mechanism. It's a evolutionary survival mechanism in an attempt to keep some content of nutrition on your body, right? Since women can use their own body fat as an energy source. A lot of women that undereat chronically and overtrain find that, especially towards middle age, they've got extra pounds that they want to get rid of but can't. And in fact, in many cases, they just need some more food.
Mm-hmm. And the right food too, because I think I think many women that train in a high capacity have had that happen before, where we're just exhausting ourselves and depriving ourselves at the same time, and maybe not necessarily making the right choice from a nutrition perspective, and you just get so out of whack. And it's crazy how you can increase volume and quality, decrease exertion, increase rest, and things start to move a little bit better. Do you have any advice or thoughts on, aside from the caloric intake, anything else from a nutrition perspective that may be more specific or tailored towards a female athlete?
The most important target, if you make any change immediately, I would say is most military women don't get enough protein. The recommendation is 1.7 to 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass. That wouldn't be a good recommendation for an obese person, or especially like an obese non-athlete. But I think it's safe to say a military woman is considered an athlete, and it means there are demands on you where your body has to move and perform well several times a week. And so for vaguely, as an example, I float around 173 pounds, and my goal was about 165 grams of protein a day. And there are several reasons for that. There's this performance aspect of, getting protein back into the system once you've broken down your muscle fibers. But women also go catabolic. Anabolic meaning muscle growth, catabolic meaning muscle loss within about 30 minutes of physical exercise if they don't eat. So at that point, you're eating your own body muscle essentially. And protein's got a lot of excellent benefits. There's a high degree of satiety. You feel full, you feel satisfied. Protein has a higher thermogenic effect. It takes more calories to process protein than it does to process carbohydrate. But in general, it is the cornerstone nutrition for your athletic function and your brain function. So I would say the first question you probably should ask your nutritionist if you go to your human performance team is, am I getting enough? And there's a good chance they'll say no. And in addition to that, I also think, again, because of this concern about, body image and things, that women tend to cut out fats excessively, but healthy fats are excellent for us. Not the vegetable oils. Those tend to be inflammatory and counterproductive, but healthy fats, olive oil, avocado, almonds, things like that. They support our adrenal function. They support our hormonal function, and they support our brain function. And so I would say look at making some lifestyle changes if you rely heavily on processed oils like vegetable oils and seed oils. That's a good recommendation as well.
Awesome. Do you have any thoughts on additional supplements for somebody that's training at a high caliber? I mean, we're bombarded in this day and age with take this, don't take that. This is good for you. Actually, it's not good for you anymore, even though it was 2 weeks ago. And see things like collagen, creatine, fish oil. I don't even know all the things. I'm not very good at keeping up with supplements, but do you have any thoughts on that? And have you seen anything in your work that is a good consideration or thing to maybe add in for a woman athlete?
So my favorite women's health and fitness guru, Dr. Stacy Sims, has been posting some fun content lately that I find it fun and exciting, because I remember 10 years ago at a time when everyone was concerned about creatine. They're like, we don't know what effect it has on the body. It's scary. Ooh. Claims around it can make you get muscle cramps, which is actually true if you're underhydrated and front loading too much. There was this, I don't know if this technique is still popular or not in the bodybuilding community, but the recommendation used to be taking several scoops of creatine a day to sort of flood the system for like a week and then reducing the dose. Probably not a necessary thing, but for just standard athletic performance. But according to Dr. Sims, the creatine has in recent research shown that not only it's safe, but it's actually beneficial for women's performance physically and also their cognition, that it's been shown as helping in reduce risk factors for cognitive decline. So the new thing that I've learned recently is creatine is good for all women. Everybody take it.
That's what I think the word on the street is. I've been taking it.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Amazing. Well, tell us, so I know that we can buy your programming through the Valkyrie Project. In a given month, short spiel, what would that programming look like for somebody that purchased it?
So we actually do programming for 8-week cycles at a time. And there's a couple different reasons for that, but predominantly we write our programming as a cycle-based cycle of workouts. So the presumption being there's 2 weeks of follicular workouts and 2 weeks of luteal workouts. At this point in time, we haven't had the capital to expand our app into something that's more intuitive in terms of everyone's individual cycle length. But the app does allow you to skip forward and back if you're in the follicular phase and you haven't ovulated yet. There's absolutely nothing stopping you from clicking back to the beginning of that week and starting again. But over an 8-week cycle, 2 months, we have 2 weeks of follicular followed by 2 weeks of luteal. And then that 1 month of program is more or less copied over to the next month, but with some adaptation changes. So the workouts will encourage you to either move a little faster or lift a little heavier or push the movement to be more taxing than the format that it might have been before. It might have been a box squat for the 2 follicular weeks in the first month, and now we'll go regular squat. And that's for the purpose of getting some progression. But we like this format, especially because in standard strength and conditioning dogma, I guess, there's always 4 to 6 weeks of heavy training and then a deload, right? So for us, it seems intuitive that women kind of have a natural deload built in the form of that one PMS, quote unquote PMS week, before premenstrual week. And so
the week that we're all sad and we don't know why.
bloated, sleepy, maybe
it happens every month, but it still takes me by surprise.
It's always offensive. And it's usually not till I've already been crying for 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, I guess my period's coming. But it definitely, it's comforting though. When you're actually tracking it, that's great advice too. Track your period. But it's comforting to know when you're tracking. You're like, okay, well, this is a temporary thing maybe in terms of, feelings of duress.
Right.
But that period of time before the bleed is an intuitive time to tick back the intensity a little bit and do more slow, steady state cardio and still lift, certainly, but maybe at sub-maximal, not going for a 1 rep max or like sets at 70, 80, 90% of your 1 rep max during that time. So we try to go in step with that intuitive flow of how you feel. And, the research that indicates that women potentially have upwards of 13% more power available in follicular. Like follicular for us is go time. You're going to lift heavier, going to do more lactic type workouts, workouts that are more taxing in a central nervous system sense. And so those little pre-bleed weeks are essentially your deload. So it's an opportunity for your body to reset a little bit so that we don't have to take you through 4 to 6 weeks of, pedal to the metal. And then by the time you get to the deload, you're already completely fizzled out and not enjoying the program.
Right.
There is some redundancy in those 8 weeks as well, because we want the athlete to see some progression. We want them to see their own numbers going up. And we do encourage our athletes to attempt to push the envelope, like whatever you squatted last week, try to put a little bit more weight on the bar, because this is what we call progression, right? Mm-hmm. This is how we get better. But most of our work is, especially in the lifting department, is on the basis of RPE, rate of perceived exertion. So in lieu of me saying, go do a 1 rep max back squat as part of our initial testing, and for the next year and a half that I'm working with you, I'm going to assign you, go at 70% of your 1 rep max, which is something you can find with a calculator. But if I ask you to perform that in maybe one specific phase, there's a potential that in another phase of your cycle, you won't be able to hit it, at least not with the same intensity, or it might feel too draining. So we really try to build in rate of perceived exertion for the athlete to say, what is 70% of what I feel like I can do today? So for me, as an example, on a really good day, I can deadlift 320 pounds. On a PMS day where I'm poorly recovered, I haven't slept well, I don't feel great, I can pull about 290. So my 90% on one day is very different from my 90% on another day in terms of how I feel. So for us, that's a way of making the programming a little bit more intuitive. Like, I'm not going to ask you to go beyond what feels right, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I can't wait to dive into it. I've been really stoked just reading about all that you're doing. And I think this fills such a needed gap that exists for women that are trying to perform at high levels and really push themselves, but also take care of themselves and understand how their body functions better. I mean, it truly gives you a better understanding of how your body is, existing, more or less. Yeah. Understanding what we're going through every week, understanding the processes that our body goes through every month. So you're in DC this week for the Valkyrie Project, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what you're doing aside from this podcast for the Valkyrie Project this week.
Sure. So we decided to take some of the key points that we identified at the Military Women's Symposium and codify them into what we are calling the critical research topics for the advancement of military women, the CRTAWs. It's an acronym. The one we published this year is on our website, and essentially it's a compilation of areas of critical need for research that we have seen not only from the last two symposiums that we've done, but also just from interfacing with the experts and the people working in the field with service members have identified. And, there's just also a sprinkling of anecdotal type stories that are indicators of emergent issues that probably are blind spots for the DOD and leaders of servicewomen. And so the 4-country caucus, which is a bipartisan congressional caucus, got a copy of our Curtas, I guess. Someone sent it to them, and they wanted to hear more. So we will be briefing them tomorrow morning.
It's so exciting. And I love that you all are not just creating programming and creating opportunities for women to address the gaps that you're filling, or the gaps that need to be filled, but also doing such meaningful and powerful advocacy. I mean, you're really coming at this from so many different angles, which is so, so cool. And what can we expect from your symposium in March? What's that going to entail?
We have set a goal for ourselves to be an honest broker in identifying areas that the military is missing opportunities to invest in women. Honest broker meaning we don't currently have any official ties with any government office, so we're free to speak candidly and in some cases bluntly about some of the difficult things that servicewomen experience and some of the challenges and barriers that are in place for them. But we also aim to bring together cutting-edge research, forward thinkers, folks that are presenting emergent information that is not only going to fit a future need, but highlights what might be a persistently unmet need currently for women. So typically, from what I've seen in the last 2 years of symposiums, a lot of surprise and conversation and opportunities to network and improve things comes from discussions around policy advancements, as well as policy gaps or lacks. And so that's a big topic of conversation. We this year had folks come out and talk about load carriage, literally a ruck march and women's capacities. We've had folks come and discuss findings from studies of women that are what some would consider elite, women that have gone through schools like Ranger, and codified that research into these are the things that we see, these are the trends that we see among these elite women, and here are some considerations for the community if you want to make more elite women. And there's also been some more personal development type of angles that servicewomen can benefit from in terms of mentorship and, what we see is like dynamics of leadership and interpersonal relationships at higher levels. But the general goal is always to present the most relevant, most current information. And for full disclosure, and this might sound a little blunt, we love servicewomen coming to participate and just learn and share their ideas. But the real bang for our buck is made when policymakers come out and people that have the power to impact these things come out and learn and share that information. But a new thing this year, I keep saying this year because it's like right around the corner. A new thing for MWS 25 is going to be breakout groups. So we want to take advantage of the opportunity to leverage individual experiences. So we'll essentially pull people aside. And by the way, when you register, you get to cast your vote on what should be discussed in the breakouts. But these are going to be our opportunities to receive information from service members and industry and researchers related to their specific concerns. What are the big blind spots that aren't being addressed? What information can we put in the next critical research topics paper to deliver to the Hill, hopefully, if we can invite it back? So I'm really excited about that. In the past two symposiums, it's been about delivering information, but this is an opportunity for more dialogue and to feed back for us things that we can take to other decision makers.
Wow. I really hope I can go.
Come on, girl.
I know. I'm really hoping to be there. It just sounds like such an amazing event and a powerful room to be in and some awesome discussions to be a part of. And hopefully we can get the word out ahead of time to some of our listeners too, to participate that are local. Well, we're nearing the end of our time, but I want to ask you our closing question that we ask everyone, and it's probably always one of the hardest, which is you've worked with many amazing women, trained them, been trained by them, currently working alongside them at the Valkyrie Project and making meaningful change with those women. But if you had to pick one or a few of women that have positively impacted you and encouraged you to be the best version of yourself, to do the meaningful work that you're doing, and to just believe in yourself, who would your woman in the arena be? Who would you pick?
You're going to hate me for not picking one. But
It's a common answer.
honestly, like my whole entire board of directors is a cast of unbelievably singular human beings. No one is afraid to rock the boat. Everyone is here for the mission. Everyone's working for free. No one's paid on our board. And the work that they're individually doing and collectively doing under the umbrella of VP is important and impressive, but just as individual human beings, no one cowers before, the gargantuan mountain of making change happen. And frankly, I tell them all the time that I'm incredibly lucky to have them on the team, because it's true. And when I'm feeling a little insecure or having moments where I'm not sure if I'm imposter syndrome, if I'm having moments of imposter syndrome, they're like, no, hell no, we're doing this. We're leaning in hard. And so I have to say, shout out to Tristan and Candace and Tiffany and Chris and Tara, the best team in the world.
Amazing.
And I couldn't do this without them.
I love that answer, because that's how I feel about our team here. It's just the best feeling in the world to be in a room with a bunch of amazing women that are busting their butt and chasing after things that they believe in, who are smart, humble, kind, uplift one another. So I love that answer. I love that you didn't just pick one.
Oh, good. Good.
Well, thank you so much. This conversation has been fantastic, and I know that it's information that's going to fall on ears that really need it, whether it's women just starting their journey with being interested in military service, kicking off their career, starting to train at high intensity levels, or women that have previously served, women that are not in the military that just care about being badasses and want to excel in their sport. I think we're really on the cusp of some pretty compelling, amazing insights, and we're just getting started. And so thankful for women like you and your team getting behind that change, making it happen, and opening more doors for us. So as a token of appreciation, we have a little gift for you. This is your Woman in the Arena bracelet. So it has a quote from the speech that our podcast is named after, just to remind you when you're doing the amazing things that you're doing, that you're a woman in the arena, you're amazing, and we hope that you can wear it during times when you're doing crazy things, making positive change in the world, and just look down and know that you are one of our women in the arena. We're cheering you on, and we're so happy to count you in as one of our guests.
I'm so touched. Thank you.
Of course.
I'm going to wear this with pride tomorrow on Capitol Hill.
Take a picture if you can. Take a selfie.
I will.
I've been wanting to get some pictures of our guests wearing them, doing cool stuff. So
100%. Cool. I'll try to get some staffers in there too.
Amazing. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Meg. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
The Women in the Arena podcast is powered by Iron Butterfly Media, a production company committed to honoring the lives of women who have had an unseen and outsized impact on our world. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have a woman who you would like to nominate as a guest, please shoot us a message on our social media platforms. Be sure to subscribe and follow on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. See you next time.